Don Stroud, dangerous hopped-up killer, who is cornered by COOGAN'S Bluff.
But COOGAN'S Bluff, I love that film. It was one of my favorite films. I played Ringerman, just this kind of nasty psychopath from Bellevue Hospital that took too much LSD.
Hi, I'm Rob Word. Welcome to A Word on Westerns, and we are talking today to a man who has not only made Westerns, and he's done some good ones with some big stars, he also is a world champion surfer. And he surfed with Big Matt Dillon. He's going to tell us all about that. Don Stroud from Hawaii. Welcome, Donnie.
How are you today? Nice to see you.
Good to see you, pal. It's been 40 years, I think, since we did something together, that tribute to Roger Corman, Outlaws of the Movies.
Roger Corman's a dear old friend of mine.
You worked with Roger again in Tobin and Brown?
Tobin and Brown. I was in a plane crash during that movie. It was quite an experience. We were shooting a close-up where the camera was on the wing, the pilot was in the front, and I was in the back, and a bird hit the pilot in the face. He had to lean out. And we spun and crashed. The wings were flying over my head, and we crashed underwater, and I took my seatbelt off underwater and came up, and I saved the pilot's life. It was really a monster. 4 people died in that film.
Oh, my goodness.
Plane crashes.
There was Shelley Winters and Robert De Niro and Bruce Dern years ago. It wasn't a big smash hit or anything, but it was a really good film, and it still plays today.
Oh, it does. I think that's one of Roger's best movies as a director, and he directed a lot. That's a classic.
I did another film with him called Von Richthofen and Brown about the Red Baron. We shot that over in Ireland, and that was great. So I did a couple of good films with him, and then I did Capone and Dillinger with him, and some other ones that we won't talk about.
Well, let's talk about your Westerns. Growing up in Hawaii as a surfer, what made you decide to come to Hollywood?
Well, they were doing a show called Hawaiian Eye. Now, I don't know how many people, not Hawaii Five-0, Hawaiian Eye.
Troy Donahue, Robert Conrad.
Connie Stevens and Ponce Ponce. Well, I was sitting there on the beach. I was 18, 19 years old. And Howie Horwitz, who was the producer there, said, "Can you surf?" Because Troy couldn't surf. And I said, "Can I surf?" At that particular time, I was 4th in the world, junior men, of course. And I said, "Can I surf?" And I started surfing for Troy Donahue in Hawaiian Eye. If you ever see those old shows in the beginning, Troy Donahue and Bob Conner are surfing down this wave. Well, that's actually me and another guy named Kui Lee, who became very famous, a singer. Most of these people have passed away. But those are the old days in Hawaii. Now, if you mentioned Gunsmoke, I came in 4th at a place called Makaha. It's on the west side of Oahu, where the surf gets huge. Now, it's a real local place. Haole boys, which white people really aren't invited there. And here comes this monster guy, stone white, with red hair, surfing a big 12-foot board. I go, "Oh, my God, that's Gunsmoke out there." He was a pretty decent surfer, but he went there to surf. There was no publicity or anything. Anybody, "Hey, how you doing? Can I have your autograph?" type of thing. He came there to surf, and he was a pretty good surfer. Most people that surf weren't as big as he was, but when he came down, it was this monster guy, stone white. I don't know how he handled the sun at all, and this red hair. And that's how I met 20 years ago, and what a privilege to do Gunsmoke 100 years later and say, "You remember Makaha?" I says, "I remember Makaha," because that's where we surfed. It was 15 feet. And nowadays they're surfing like 30, 40-foot waves, which I can't imagine what the wipeout must be like, the wipeout beach, the violence of it. But in those days, 15 feet was huge because we had longboards and we didn't have leashes and stuff like that. So when we lost our board, you had to swim. But that was one of my great first experiences with James Arness, and it went from there, you know.
So when you were doubling Troy Donahue, that was all done in Hawaii. Most of those shows, I think, were shot in Burbank on the back lot, too. Did they bring you to Hollywood, or how did you first arrive to Los Angeles?
They came to Hawaii every couple months and did all the walking down the street in Kalakaua and like different things that matched in the stuff. It's like in Mike Hammer, we'd go to New York every couple of months and walk down the street, and then they'd cut to the studio or, to get the idea of New York. But they'd come over here and we'd shoot a lot of stuff, all surfing stuff. The surfing in Hawaii was quite different from California, and the water was a lot warmer too.
Well, then I understand that once you came to Hollywood, you were a bouncer at the Whisky A Go-Go during the heyday of all these great acts that were coming through there.
Heyday, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Doors, The Byrds. It goes on and on and on. The great Procol Harum, the Grateful Dead, the Jefferson Airplane, just some of the greatest groups in the world, the Mothers of Invention. I was Frank Zappa's bodyguard for a long time too. But I started there as a bouncer, and it was just before I started getting some parts. And my first agent, Dick Clayton, who had he had Al Pacino, he had some really good actors. He had James Dean before he died and stuff like that. He says, you want to give it a shot? I said, I'd love to become an actor. And Sidney Poitier, who became a friend of mine, came into the Whisky Go-Go lot. I said, Sidney, I'd like to become an actor. And he says, son, you go and do it. Get yourself some pictures and get yourself a good agent, because a lot of people don't realize when you start, it's the agent that puts you in front, knocking on the doors for you. And I started out pretty good. I started, some of my first Westerns was The Virginian.
Yes.
In Universal Studios, and it went on and on and on.
At Universal, did they put you under a contract there for so many films or so many years?
$300 a week. And I was driving in a limousine. I lived in Beverly Hills. I don't know how I made this all work, because I was kind of floating in it, because I was acting like a millionaire when I was broke. It was great fun, because we were like starting to work and stuff, but it was only $300-400 a week when I was under contract. And then when I did Tick, 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 which was a kind of a decent Western with football player, Jim Brown, they finally gave me a couple of bucks, because it was hard to become what I was becoming and going to Academy Awards and stuff like that with tuxedos. I couldn't even afford the tuxedo.
Well, Tick, Tick, Tick was directed by Ralph Nelson, who was one of Sidney Poitier's favorite directors. He directed Lilies of the Field and Duel at Diablo with Sidney. What was Ralph Nelson like on that film, Tick, Tick, Tick?
I thought it was a pretty decent film. I had a great, great part. It's so funny. I'm far from what you want to call a white supremacist or anything like that, but I played so many parts like that of just this nasty, nasty guy. And I had a couple of things with the black people who are dear friends of mine. I live in Hawaii, man. There's no none of that crap over here. I know Hawaiians and Samoans and Chinese and Japanese people, and we all grew up together on the beach. Mostly some beautiful Hawaiian people. There's not as many Hawaiian people around as there used to be. It's kind of a race that's fading out a little bit. It's very unfortunate. But pure Hawaiians, there's very, very few. But I grew up with that group of people. But I played those kind of parts. I played these nasty, bad guys. And I worked all the time. So I could have waited. I wasn't a doctor or a lawyer or any of that kind of stuff. So I just got caught into these bad guys, but good parts, like on Hawaii Five-0 and all that stuff. They were just terrific parts. Well,
one of the bad guys you played, I think Don Siegel in the movie Madigan. That must have been a big break for you, because all of a sudden that's not TV. You're in a big budgeted movie with Henry Fonda and Richard Widmark.
That Richard Widmark was a good guy. We got along really well. That was a pretty good film. But before that, I did COOGAN'S Bluff with Don Siegel. But we're going way back.
Don Stroud, dangerous hopped-up killer, who is cornered by COOGAN'S Bluff.
But COOGAN'S Bluff, I love that film. It was one of my favorite films. I played Ringerman, just this kind of nasty psychopath from Bellevue Hospital that took too much LSD.
Jimmy! The cowboy. He was right behind me, and now he's gone.
What did you bring him here for? You little freak!
And I played this part when Clint became one of my dear friends. And of course, we did Joe Kidd after that, which was pretty decent Western. Mm-hmm. Pretty decent.
And COOGAN'S Bluff, because that ultimately, it was so successful, and it turned into the TV series McCloud, but Clint's part in that, it seemed like a wonderful transition for him from the Western persona to Dirty Harry, because he plays like a Western sheriff coming to New York tracking you down.
Clint Eastwood is
Coogan.
You from Texas?
Arizona.
and New York City never met his equal.
You were fabulous in that. No wonder you played so many villains. What a role that is.
Well, in those days, Universal, there was a lot of great TV, too. A lot of great TV shows. So we worked a lot, we worked a lot. And when I didn't work, it was very hard for me. It was very, very hard for me when I did not work. Fortunately, I worked a lot. But when I was out of work, it wasn't great times for me in life. I needed that work because, I indulged, partied pretty hard. I indulged in a lot of things. And those days, there was a lot of cocaine and everybody drank. And I'm talking about we drank, you know what I mean? I used to run around with Lee Marvin, and we used to live in Malibu. And another actor named Neville Brand. I don't know if you remember Neville Brand.
Yeah.
One of my dear, dear friends. Oh, he was a tough guy. He was an ex-Marine. He was quite a guy. And we did a film over Yugoslavia with Kirk Douglas called Scallywags. It was kind of a half-ass Western and stuff. But Kirk was great. We went over to Yugoslavia. At that time, it was Yugoslavia. It's quite a while ago. But Neville Brand was in the film. And what great guys. But we used to live in Malibu. Lee Marvin, Neville Brand, and Paladin. Who played Paladin?
Richard Boone.
We all lived in Malibu. We all lived at the beach, 3 cowboys. And we drank at a place called The Raft. And it was drinking days.
Now, did you ever take those guys surfing?
Well, they were the surfers. James Arness was the surfer, but those guys were the television actors, and we all lived right on the same street in Malibu. And 6 o'clock in the morning, the 3 of us would kind of meet in the driveway, going to work at Universal, which was out in the valley. But those were wonderful days. But we all hung around at a place called The Raft, and it was on Pacific Coast Highway, and those were drinking days. Good days, but they were drinking days,
I know Lee drank a lot, and Richard Boone, we hear about that. I mean, do you think that that was part of being a big star at the time? Is all that fun drinking?
Well, it was, those days were party days. I'm sure they are now too, but I've calmed down. I haven't drank in almost 20 years now. But we did a lot of things. We did cocaine and stuff like that. Not Neville Brand and them did do, but I did when I got a little older. And that was slippery stuff. So that brought me to my knees. That was some very rough times in life. I was at Universal, and I had some problems with that stuff, and I don't say it hurt my working as much because I worked all the time, but those were really rough times.
How did you quit cocaine? Because it's so addictive.
Well, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Is exactly what it was. It was either we're going to do this, or we're going to take your picture off the wall at Universal. Everybody had their pictures up there and stuff, and this is how it's going to be. You're going to stop this, or otherwise you're not going to work here anymore. And the word got around, and I just stopped. I just stopped that day. And I quit drinking that day, and I stopped drinking that day. And there was Monique James and the Tower Universal and all that. They were all very happy about that. And I kind of went straight till now.
Yeah, well, no, that's good.
Well, it was a great time, but sometimes we really overdid it, especially with the booze. I can remember when I got a couple of drunk drivings and stuff like that when I was young. Now, don't forget, this is a long time ago. I'm not talking about my life now. This was a long time ago. And we were talking about Westerns. Now we're talking about a lot of other things. But those were those days at Universal. But the best part was once my contract was up, then I kind of moved around to Warner Brothers and MGM. And we did Choir Boys and all those pretty good films.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you also got to play a good guy, a good cop on Mike Hammer. That was good, too. That was a nice run you had for that.
That was a good part. I love that show, and we made a couple bucks on that show. That was finally we started making some money, because the money they make nowadays has nothing to do with the money we made those days. We'd make $5,000 a week and stuff like that. Now they make $50,000 a week. So it's a big difference in the money. But Mike Hammer, Stacy Keach, my brother, talked to him the other day. We keep in touch a lot. He's another Malibu guy. We all lived down the beach in Malibu, and Stacy was just one of the great, great all-time people.
Well, and his brother directed you in a Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
I played the Buffalo Hunter, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I forgot about it.
What was that like? Because at that time, it wasn't the heyday of the Westerns, but Jane Seymour, that was a really popular Western at the time.
Talk about another nice lady. She's a nice lady. I liked her very much. It was just before her and Jimmy were married, and I was out hunting myself. But it was a great day. We shot that up in the mountains, and I can't remember where we were, but it was great because I was riding, and I rode pretty good. The boys at Universal, the Wranglers, took me back up the back lot. We'd ride every day. It's like with the motorcycle, too. They took me on the back lot, told me how to ride the motorcycle and stuff, and just wonderful days.
You want Louis Chama?
I told you the deal, $500, and I don't care who pulls the trigger on it.
The price will be $1,000.
I'm not gonna permit some sheep herder by the name of Louis Chama to get away with stirring up the Mexican population and talk about land reform. Or am I gonna waste time arguing in court?
Mingo, I want him alive.
When you all were in Lone Pine, California for Joe Kidd, you've got not just Clint and Bobby Duvall, who are both great horsemen, but you've got Paul Koslow, who was a friend, and all of those wonderful stuntmen, too. Walter Scott and those guys were there, too, Buddy Van Horn.
Walter Scott was my boy. Talk about a great guy. He's a great guy, but then Paul Koslow was a dear friend of mine. And he passed away, right?
Yes, he did. He did.
Yes, he was a dear, dear friend of mine. We're going back quite a few years now. But Robert Duvall and I became buddies, and God, he had a great career. So Joe Kidd was good. Clint Eastwood should have directed that film.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about that, because John Sturges gets a lot of the credit for it, but everybody says Clint sort of made a lot of the decisions on Joe Kidd, and it looks it. It looks it.
Well, there was a lot of problems on that set. I'm not going to go into too much between director and actor and stuff. But the great thing that happened one time, there was a blowout. We were way up in the mountains, and there was trouble. And there was a great silence on the set. All the cowboys with their guns and sitting around. And here comes an ice cream truck. Ding, 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 up this dirt road. Clint ordered ice cream for everyone on the set. And all the cowboys with the really weird cowboys eating the ice cream with the gun here and the gun in between. And it kind of settled things down. But I'll never forget it. It went ding, 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 ding. And here comes this ice cream truck. It was so funny. So Clint bought ice cream for everybody, and that kind of calmed things down.
When Mr. Harlem doesn't want me around anymore, you let me know, huh, boy?
Now that, he's producing and directing all the time, he likes a calm, easygoing set. In films like COOGAN'S Bluff that you did with him, what was the atmosphere of the set like on that film with Don Siegel, who was his mentor?
Well, it was one of my first times to New York. I've been to New York with Mary Tyler Moore and George Papar. We did a thing called What's So Bad About Feeling Good and a couple of other things. But this was going to New York, and I was kind of getting well known. So in a limousine, I was at the Essex House. I said, "Oh, look at this!" I was making about $400 a week. Those were those days. They gave me a little more money for it, but it was just great. The atmosphere was wonderful because Don Siegel was top of the line. What a really, really solid guy. And Clint and I got along great. And the motorcycle chases, they were good. Those motorcycle chases were good when we went down the stairs, and that was in a place called COOGAN'S Bluff. It was in COOGAN'S Bluff, right out of Central Park there. But it was such a joy doing a film like that because I knew it was working, and everybody else did. And from then on, things kind of really started changing. I started getting some really decent parts, and of course, a little more money.
Now, you did a couple films with Tisha Sterling.
Coogan here.
Wrong number.
Kill him, Jimmy.
You know, there's another doll. Oh, we got along great. We lived, she was living in Topanga Canyon, so that was down the beach. Well, we were all beach people at that time. But I can't say enough about Tish. She was just a great, great girl. I think she should have had a bigger career, but who knows? You know how things go. You know, you get married, you do this, you do that. I was very, very fortunate because I did over 100 films and over 200 television shows. So I was very, very fortunate. Like Raymond Burr, he was doing Ironside. He said, "What are you doing, Don?" I said, "Well, I'm not doing anything." Next day I was on Ironside. So it was a great time in my life. I was good. I was a good actor.
Oh, yeah.
And I could play this certain part, like Hawaii Five-0. Oh, I love the parts on Hawaii Five-0. I don't know if you saw any. But I played a hitman from Chicago on Hawaii Five-0. And I was supposed to come and murder this woman that it was a witness to a murder. So I end up killing another girl, putting her watch on her and dumping her in the alibi, and fell in love with the girl. But then the mafia turned around and wanted me to murder this girl. I don't know if you can stay with what I'm going, but it was a great part. Then another one I played in a wheelchair, a basketball player in Hawaii Five-0. So that show was really good. I did 4 of those, but it was nice because I came from the mainland and stayed at the Kala Hilton, and I lived right down the street when I was a kid. I lived on Pueo Street. I would look at this. This hotel wasn't even built here. They built it, and I stayed at the Kala Hilton. And those were wonderful days. Oh, those were wonderful days. But I was in the mainland already, came back to Hawaii to do it.
When you would return to Hawaii, would you see a lot of the buddies that you had growing up as well?
I hate to say it, but they're all gone. Mm-hmm. I was junior men, Waikiki Surf Club. I was a paddler. I was a canoe paddler. And I'm the only one left in the boat. We were undefeated. These guys were Samoans and Hawaiians and really tough guys. These were tough Hawaiian kids. And they're all kind of gone. But see, most of my friends were like 10 years older than me. So when we were kids, we were teenagers. They were in their 20s. When I was in my 20s, they were like, in their 60s. So most of them gone. But these beach boys that I grew up with, Steamboat and Wada and Mudwater and Watanabe and Bobby Choi and Dookie and Blackout and Mud, these guys were kings. And Waikiki in those days was just the Royal Hawaiian, the Surf Rider, and the Wana Hotel. And I remember my dad had a restaurant called the Embers. My mom was a blues singer, and she married this wonderful guy. And we lived above the restaurant, on Beach Walk Avenue. I don't know, some people don't know where these places are. But you'd walk down through past the Halekulani. And in those days, the Halekulani, which is probably the most fanciest hotel in the world, those days was like grass shacks. But these were $500 night grass shacks, you know what I mean? So that was it. Then you'd come out to Waikiki Beach by the Royal Hawaiian, and I'd see Steamboat and Curly, and they had their Kamoi boat, 40-foot koa canoe, and he taught me to surf and how to swim, and then the ladies in Hawaii was just great because in those days it really was the coconut tree with the moon and the guy playing the ukulele with the girl dancing. It was really like that.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It was like the postcard that you see now. It was really like that. And it was wonderful, wonderful times.
Well, and your mom was a singer and with Sinatra. Didn't she tour with Frank Sinatra?
She toured with Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope. She did the USO with Bob Hope. She was a marvelous woman. Ann McCormick, she could sing. But they had their own club, and it was called the Embers. It was on Lures Road. And like I say, we lived upstairs when I was a kid. And it was just wonderful, wonderful times. But those are Hawaii days.
Yeah,
you know?
Boy, it sure has changed. Now it's very, very commercial. But let me get back to your beach buddies in Malibu, like Richard Boone. You did an episode of Heck Ramsey with Richard Boone, too.
A great story. I was doing a scene in the show where I had to weep. Someone just died, and I'm crying pretty good here at this scene. I was doing it with silence, and Richard Boone walked in on a red light, which no actors do. That means we're shooting, do not open this door. He walked in, and I think he was a little, he said, "What's going on here?" And he heard me weeping. And the silence was overwhelming. And I looked at him. He was off camera. I looked at him. He looked at me. And I went right back to my scene. But I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. He was my buddy, man. He was one of the guys. He was Neville Brand. He was one of those guys, you know.
Well, he was special, and he loved acting and directing, but he also loved to fish. Did you ever go fishing with him? No, because my fishing days were Hawaii and stuff. We were in California and all that, so I was playing that angle, you know.
Your part on Gunsmoke, after going up to Arness and say, "Remember me? I'm the kid that you were surfing with back in Hawaii." What was that like on Gunsmoke? Because it had been on for quite a few years already. I think this was toward the end of the Gunsmoke run.
This is a lot of years later. I didn't say, "Do you remember me?" because I was a kid. I was pretty young. But I said, "Hey, you remember Makaha?" I said, "Do I remember Makaha? Do I remember it?" It's a very special place. It's a very spiritual, heavyweight place. And it's very, very local. So white people, the surf there is a big deal. We got to surf there because I knew Buffalo Kealano, who's kind of one of the mucky mucks over there, you know, the Heliana Ois. And we all took it from there. But what I talked to was more, we talked about Makaha and surfing. But he was a good surfer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he went out the waves. I would say 15 feet waves on a longboard is big waves. That's why the shortboards like Bonsai Pipeline, the shortboards are like maybe 5-6 feet. The longboards were 10 to 12 feet with no leash. So when you lost your board, you had to swim for miles sometimes because Makaha would break out about a half a mile.
Well, and he was like 6'7", so he needed that big board.
There was no such thing as little boards in those days. It was all 10 feet and above. So it was longboard days, but it was different style of surfing. It was the difference between riding a Cadillac or a Ferrari. The longboard being the Cadillac, of course. The Ferrari is just short, wang, 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 wang. Where longboard is more, coming down, you know. I love talking about surfing. I think you can tell.
Again, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And I know you've got a lot of fans out there who watch our show, and they're thrilled that you were able to join us from Hawaii. So, Donnie, thank you. And Terry, thank you for bringing him to the screen.
You know, this is I like this kind of interview where we sort of just talk, not about what you think about so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. This was nice. It was a real pleasure to see you again, and I enjoyed it very much.
Well, thank you, and aloha.
Aloha, ahui ho.
Outlaws of the silver screen, some are playing rebels and some are just me. Outlaws of the silver screen, taking what you want is an outlaw's dream. You got your past written on your face, keeps you running on a high-speed chase. You're an outlaw.
You just spend your time reading about us. You turn on your radios and you listen about us.
Always looking for another high. There ain't nothing that you won't try. You're an outlaw.
We want to be free to do what we want to do. And we want to get loaded.
Yeah! Fast wheeling and faster wheels. Always hungry for the love to steal. You're an outlaw.
Here is the host of Outlaws of the Movies, Robert Walden.
Welcome to our last night of Outlaws of the Movies week. I've seen a lot of exciting films that would never have been made within the confines of a major studio. There were movies that broke new ground in terms of what audiences wanted and accepted.
Place in the sunrise sitting over there. They told you to? Oh, okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, I just didn't say by you.
These things never worked, did they?
Yes, they did. They worked very good. And a certain character was in the picture. Once, just before I got ready to shoot, I said to you, remember, I said, give me that real clip I brought from the hotel.
No. There was the bobby pin.
Shelley, let me ask you something.
What?
How did this whole thing come about? It was my first Hollywood film. It was Bobby De Niro's first Hollywood film. Don was already rolling on his own. But you're the one who got us up to see Roger.
I was the associate producer, sort of, in this picture, and I had 10% after $3 million, and I never got paid, and it made a lot of money, especially in Europe. And if Roger Corman sees this, he told me that I should tell...
He's here.
Is he? All right. Mr. Arkoff, even though he sold this picture to the Filmways, that I'd better pay me my money. But I loved it. I loved doing it. It was a great... It really was a great experience. There was a kind of way that they make films in Europe. It was improvisatory to a degree. Roger got us into the characters, and then we went.
Do you remember when you made an announcement at the Actors Studio one morning? Do you remember what you said?
No.
You made an announcement. You said, if there's anybody here who thinks they can play anywhere from 18 to 26 to see you after the session.
What a casting call that was.
That's true, it was.
I came up to you, and what did I say?
You said you think you could play 18 years old.
No, that's not what I remember. I remember I said, Shelley, is Roger Corman really in town, or you're just trying to set up your summer? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
But that was...
I think I'll smack you now. Okay.
You did. We all got smacked in that movie.
You know, the first scene, it was when we were shooting, the first scene, the very first day, Roger didn't tell me. I come on the set. The boys had all been called before. My first thing to do, this is when, was to give you all a bath. And there, Bobby De Niro was in the tub, and you were next. So the only way I could do it was to absolutely pretend you were babies. There was no other way I could bathe. I refused to bathe him. I wouldn't bathe him.
First scene, and it was nude, right?
That's right. 3.
And you kept dropping the soap.
No, I didn't. To be serious about this film, one of the reasons I cared about it so much is I did a lot of research. And Ma Barker was kind of a folk hero. During the Depression, the banks and the railroads were foreclosing on all the farmers in the Midwest. And they used to hide the Barker gang and hide Ma Barker. And at one point, J. Edgar Hoover said she was public enemy #1. Because when you went to prison, the character, and brought people, men home, she would plan the robbery so that they always got away, or most of the time got away.
I think Ma Barker was the first criminal in the United States that took a percentage for planning,
Yes.
didn't she?
I want my percentage. Okay?
First agent.
And also, I must say that I feel that if the picture had been made a little more expensively, like another week of shooting, it would have been in the statue of Bonnie and Clyde. Johnny Alonzo's now, it was his first picture, the cameraman, and he's now very expensive and very
What did he
famous
win the
too.
Oscar for, Chinatown?
Yeah.
Do you remember you told me this film plays every year on the Champs-Élysées in Paris?
Yes, it does.
That it's become an enormous cult film in Europe?
Yeah, it does.
And you showed me the Sunday Times when the film was reviewed. It was entire page 3 of New York Sunday Times, and it said Roger Corman's greatest monster film, as I remember. That's what they called it.
Talking about me?
I think he was talking about all of us.
Well, the interesting thing about her, she was very, very jealous of her sons, and she never allowed women to ride in the car with her and her sons. There were several cars, and she was 13 years older than her oldest son, who was him. Don Stroud was Herman, her oldest son, and nobody ever knows. I mean, for sure.
How did Did you get Don?
Yes,
involved in the movie?
Yes.
Wait a minute, I got you in the movie.
No, I got everybody in the movie. 1, 2, 3. All right. It seems that Roger talked to me about it, and then he came to New York. Thank you so much, dear. And God knows what they're going to use of this.
All of it. All of it.
And I remember he saw some actresses for Diane Varsi's part. She was brilliant in the movie. Really wonderful, wonderful actress. And we rehearsed, remember? We changed some of the characters. Alex Nichol played the father, remember?
What happened right after this film? I mean, you went into 2 Clint Eastwood movies right after that?
This was about my
COOGAN'S, Bluff.
3rd or 4th film. I did about 32 after that.
32 films.
Yeah.
Shelley?
I decided after this picture that I wanted to play a nice mother, and so I did a musical on Broadway called Minnie's Boys, in which I played the mother of the Marx Brothers. I mean, this was such a horrendous woman that I felt I had to cleanse myself by playing a nice mama.
Was this the largest age range or the first time
Yes,
you ever played over
yes.
a 20-year?
I mean, I went from about 18 years old to 60, I think, or 55, something like that. And it was fun.
You couldn't play 60.
Oh, sure, I could, kid.
Anyway, this film has come back to either make us laugh or make us smile or haunt us or make us proud, but I have never had more fun in this movie than anything else I've ever done in the business.
Bobby, let me ask you a
I
question.
don't think the police in Arkansas felt that way.
How are they going to show this movie on television?
It's about 16 minutes long, I hear.
No, this is a rough one.
I think they had to trim out about 8 or 10 or 20 minutes.
You mean when I'm giving you boys baths? They took that out?
What about the part where we're drawing the little girl in the bathtub? That's kind of cute.
Yeah, I think that's going to...
She was good, Belinda Montgomery. Or
yes.
Do you remember the shootout in this movie? Do you remember the days before the shootout when we heard that A.D. Flowers, the great special effects man who did The Godfathers and Tora Tora, that he had been wiring this house before the production even started?
We were scared.
Do you remember in real life that gunfight was 4 days long? And the people came and brought their picnics and stuff?
Oh, it was unbelievable.
I mean,
I don't remember where we were. So it's in Arkansas. And but 300 people came and brought picnic lunches, and for all they knew, it was a real shootout with the FBI. I'll never forget that. It was really strange.
Little Rock, Arkansas. Yeah. The Sam Peck Motel.
Yeah.
You remember strange things.
I had a few laughs.
How about the day of the funeral when we were burying Bobby De Niro?
That was, I'll never forget that. Bobby was so into playing. He plays a kid, he's older than you. He was my most beloved child and sort of retarded and a junkie. And the day that I buried him, he was so into the role. And that time, he lost 40 pounds, where he did Raging Bull and gained about 50. Well, when we were burying him, he got into the grave. I mean, we were shoveling dirt in the grave, and so I thought it was a dummy. And suddenly I realized that it was really Bobby, and I said, "Cut."
And he's no dummy.
I said, "Bobby, I refuse to bury you. You're allowed to smother. Get out."
Okay, well, you worked with Roger again in Tobin and Brown?
Tobin and Brown. I was in a plane crash during that movie. It was quite an experience. We were shooting a close-up where the camera was on the wing, the pilot was in the front, and I was in the back, and a bird hit the pilot in the face. He had to lean out. And we spun and crashed. The wings were flying over my head, and we crashed underwater, and I took my seatbelt off underwater and came up, and I saved the pilot's life. It was really a monster. 4 people died in that film.
Oh, my goodness.
Plane crashes. Yeah.
Oh, dear. It cheers me up. I'm going to Chicago in a few minutes.
Do a play.
Yes.
Taking a bus?
After that story, I will. I did another picture for Roger called Wild in the Streets.
Oh, I remember.
Good movie.
A wonderful movie with Chris Jones and Dinah Voice.
Yeah.
And about a lot of Roger. It was Roger Pryor's first movie.
Right. I think that we're come to the end of a brief, frantic discussion about Roger and the movie, and
You mean it's over?
some fun we had, about 12
You mean
years
this interview
ago.
thing is over?
But as many people as Roger has been known to discover, and as much talent as he's given a chance, I want to thank publicly to whoever's watching this woman here for getting me off the waiter's floor and giving me my first movie role, getting me up for it. So,
My third.
thanks, Ma.
Thank
On
you.
top of the world.
Let's get out of here.
We'll see you soon.
Off to Chicago flying.
Okay, you want me to crank up the car?
Please do.
Robert will return with scenes from tomorrow night's feature right after this.